Stefan, we're going to talk about virtual try on today. And I know a lot of fashion brands would like to offer this service to their customers. What insights have you and the AI team at Touchtech acquired, which you could share? What can the state of the art AI models that are available today accomplish?
Hello, Deniz. Yeah, let's have a look. So I would say virtual try-on is something like the holy grail of fashion AI. And what we can see here, I've prepared is a bit of the history where it's coming from. And there have been attempts to do this for, I think now, 2-3 years. And here you can see a bit of a comparison. So in the beginning, this is more back in time. And what is happening here is you see here is always a model picture wearing something different. And then we have here a fashion item. And then the AI model tries to combine them. So here we see that model wearing now that shirt. And we see here in the beginning, yeah, that's somewhat like the shirt, but also not quite right. And well, nowadays, this is the model we will look a bit more in detail today. Actually, these two. And you see it's better. Today we will also discover that it's, if we're there yet or not. So shall we have a look?
Yes, sounds great. For sure, it has been evolving quite nicely. What's the part with the GP, Vuitton, LADI? Are these various companies, or I guess it's the name of the models, but
Yeah, that's right. Usually that is the name of the model. These models come usually either from, let's say, research teams at universities, or companies like, for example, Snapchat, ByteDance, that kind of caliber, trying to tackle this virtual try-on problem for their applications. And then they release these kind of models. And also, what is maybe interesting to note is, especially in research, it's very important if you always try to publish something new and you try to publish a paper. And that also entails that you try to compare your solution to the other existing solutions. And ideally, of course, you want to be better than those. What we can see down here, that is more the scientific part of it. You see a lot of numbers. Here we see, again, these models up here. And you see a lot of numbers. Essentially, what these numbers mean is it's a comparison between the image that model outputs versus a real-world image. So what we looked at here, for example, out of these, if you just look at that column, it's called FID. It's essentially a metric. The smaller the number, the better in this case. So here we see the model we will look at today, IBM Vuitton. Has the lowest number, that's why we picked it. So which also means it's the closest to a real picture out of all of these models here.
Cool. All right, let's see what it is capable of.
Absolutely. So let's start. So this is like a test environment that we can use. And I've loaded this model. And what we can see here, so here we already have some samples, but we will use our own. So first of all, we need a human, basically a fashion model. I've already prepared here some, so we will pick one of those. Let's start with man fashion. And something simple. So here we have a person wearing plain white t-shirt. And what we're gonna do is to dress him with another t-shirt. So let's also here start with something easy. A plain polo shirt, nothing special. So additionally to these two pictures, what we will give it is a little prompt, which is essentially text describing what this is. This could also be automated, but in this case here we have to do that ourselves. And now we just describe that as pink polo shirt. And this is needed. It helps the model a bit to understand sort of how the garment should fit in the end. And then we press try on. So as everything in AI, this will take a moment. You can see the progress. Yeah, then
What is it doing right now?
it's, let's say in simple words, it's processing the images in different ways. So what it first of all does, and we can go that in a little bit more detail later, we will actually see the results, but it's essentially, first of all, creating a mask of this picture. So it tries to figure out where is, in this picture, where is actually the original shirt. So that's actually what we see here. So that is the first step. And then it basically knows, okay, within this area, that is where I have to paste in, so to say, this shirt. And that is then a second step in which it, now in this picture, they're actually very similar. So it's a very similar perspective also. But you can imagine if that person would be a bit rotated, like it often happens in model shots, that it would also actually have to kind of warp this image a little bit.
But this is quite cool. I mean, it really does look similar, even though the mask was not necessarily perfect either.
Yes, and this mask, it is not really about the exact shape of it. It's more like, okay, here is sort of the area, like the outer boundaries. It's more like a guide than a perfect mask for this.
Cool.
All right, now let's maybe try something else. Or one thing we can actually try before. So now we used a model shot that is a bit more zoomed in. But often, of course, we also have different types, or standard model shot is also this one, for example. So now we have the model fully. So let's see if that works.
It's also slightly more angled this time.
Exactly. That's what I meant before. So now it actually has to kind of warp this whole image also a bit so that it fits in.
This time that it takes to generate, can that be sped up in any way?
Generally, there are ways to speed this up. So when it comes to AI, a lot of these models, they require quite powerful GPUs, basically graphic cards. And you see up here, that is actually the one we are using right now. It's called L4. And there are different types of those graphic cards. Of course, they come with different price points. And like usual, if it's more expensive, then it tends to be better. So we could use here a bit more expensive one. And then that would also accelerate the rendering. Like usually, it's about finding kind of the sweet spot. What's the time that you can afford? And how much, or what's the money that you want to spend, and then you try to find a good combination there.
All right. This one looks very nice as well. Is there any way to just see the image a little bit larger, just to see the details? What is the highest resolution that it can create?
Absolutely. So here's now the full image. Up here, you can actually see the resolution. So max and height, 1024 pixels. That is the size that this model has been trained on, which also means this is exactly the size you will always get out of it without actually doing retraining yourself. So what one can do, there are nowadays also these other AI models that you can maybe go into at another point, upscaling models. So that is essentially a model where you give it a picture and then you give the task, well, make it bigger. And it basically has to create details on its own. And they're also becoming quite good. So that is one way how you could improve on this. Or by retraining this virtual try-on model yourself on larger images.
Got it. It looks very accurate. And I think that is one of the key things in fashion, especially consumer-facing ones, that it cannot be too creative, so to say. For example, it has white lines just about the, on the arm there where the polo kind of stops. Can we just check in the original photo if that is also the case?
Sure, we can also zoom in. So yes, we have these lines here. Of course, this is where we will also later see where maybe some of the problems occur, but it's usually about these details. Here, this line, this logo especially, so you can double check as well. I mean, now it's rather small, so we cannot really see it, but yeah, it's somewhat in the right spot.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one little detail that I noticed down here, you see it's this black line here. This is actually not here. So there's a tiny detail that it actually added.
I thought it was shadow.
Yeah,
All right.
I mean, in this case, you could probably still see it as shadow, might be fine. All right. Shall we try something more?
Let's see if we can challenge it.
Absolutely. So let's see. I've prepared here something. So let's go with this one.
Oh.
So the difference here, it's actually very similar to what he's already wearing. So this is generally it's an easy item. It's a t-shirt. However, what makes it hard is the print. So there's a lot of details in the print, and also this is definitely not something that the model has ever seen before. It's a very new item to it. So let's try to describe that. Something like this.
It would be nice to also see how it would create it without this text to see if it becomes much worse.
We can try that.
Can you speak to the cost aspect while we're waiting? So you said we're running on L4 GPU. I mean, rough idea how much does it cost to render one of these?
I can show you. So here's a price table of, this is from one provider that we actually use. Of course, if you use a different provider, these numbers can differ, but I think the ballpark is generally quite right here. So you can see here's an L4, and usually, I mean, you usually build per second, unless you really rent that or you even buy that GPU yourself. And now per hour, I think it's easier to get a picture here. So L4 would cost us $1 per hour, which sounds maybe first, it sounds not so much, but then if you imagine, okay, we see now one image takes half a minute, which then means if you calculate it, it's 120 images per hour, equals $1 in that case. Yeah. And of course, if you go up here, you see, I mean, 800, this is nowadays pretty much the fastest you can get. But yeah, it's also then nearly 8 times more expensive.
Got it.
Okay, let's see what happened. All right. So let's zoom in. So here we already see a bit like where it starts to struggle. So, I mean, generally from the far away, you could say, yeah, it's still somewhat the same impression, but yeah, the details here, I mean, especially text, turns out is a bit of an issue often. So it looks somewhat like it, but yeah, you cannot really read it anymore.
Got it. How about the, because it felt like the sleeve or where the t-shirt kind of stopped was really wide. And I guess that's a challenge in its own, like fits and sizes in general, right?
Exactly. So beside let's say the print and the visual details, another thing that is of course important in fashion as well is to get an understanding of how does it fit me? How does that in real life, how would that the garment basically fall on the body? And here also these models, they tend to be a bit, let's say, creative. So they usually try to make it fit. I can actually show you, I mean, just to make that very clear. Let's pick the image of a banana. And, well, it's a yellow banana, I guess. And see what happens. So, of course, generally we would expect that nothing happens. I haven't seen many people wearing banana these days. But let's see what happens.
What is it called in fashion? Haute couture? No.
Well, there you probably see a lot of these things actually. So that, yeah, maybe there were actually people wearing this.
I would not be surprised.
Yeah. All right, banana. So what we can see, I can actually zoom in a bit. It's funny. So something happened. And that is the thing. So these models will always try to make it somewhat fit. Can also be use case. I mean, maybe you can use that to get inspired with a new collection, but obviously, yeah, that is
I definitely
different.
see spring summer 25 collection. Yeah, but I mean that is for sure in a positive way for certain aspects of the business, like designers and the trend analytics, right? That they could use this type of models that are creative in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, there can certainly be applications. It's just the application, or let's say one use case that we see is, okay, maybe I as a consumer on an e-commerce website would like to know how do I look in this shirt. Then of course the fit is quite important to give you that information. In other use cases like here, okay, I just want to come up with new fashion ideas. Yeah, that's maybe actually useful.
All right. Okay. So, do you have any other top parts that you want to showcase? Because I'm also curious about like other type of categories, both in terms of layering, so jacket on top of something, or the bottom parts, dresses, and so on. What can you say about that?
All right. I mean, let's try maybe the layering first. Well, basically here the challenge is, so you have an image of the model wearing some sort of t-shirt, and now we have here, I had here a blazer, I think. So, and now we would like to see that blazer on that model. So let's see what happens.
Is there any way to speed this process up because I guess it recalculates the model as well as the pack shot. Do you think there any way to speed it up from a implementation point of view?
That depends, of course, on the particular model. In this case here, yes, there would be one way to speed it up by basically, I'm technically call that caching. So we would keep a copy of that first step here, because that is always the same. So if this model image stays the same, this mask will always be the same too. So you could basically just save that for the next time, and then you don't have to redo this. So that would potentially speed it up, for example. Yeah.
All right.
All right. So here is our result. And well, generally the blazer fits somewhat. What we already see here, yeah, the blazer is, I mean, I would say it's a bit too tight, and also the arms are a bit short. But even more importantly, the t-shirt under got lost. So it somehow created a new shirt out of that pattern here. So layering is challenge. Yes.
And this is literally the best virtual try-on AI model that is out there, and it cannot figure out the fit in or the length of the arms or the layering, really.
Exactly. So what happens now? Unfortunately, the image went away, but it uses the original image. So I mean, how you can improve it, generally speaking, is if the original image is already close to the result you're looking for. So in this case, he has a t-shirt, so short sleeves. And that, I think, was also what made the arms shorter in the result. So if that would have been a long sleeve, then that would probably have been better. So here we see him, and this arm is rather short. So that is probably because here he's wearing a t-shirt.
Got it.
So yeah, in the meantime, I tried to maybe tweak it with the prompt. Sometimes that works. Didn't work here. So pretty much the same result. Also, one thing actually to note, which I haven't said before, is that these models, they are not deterministic. That means if I press this button again, so I redo the whole thing, the result might actually look a bit different. So you always get a slightly different variant out of this. Which also means that what we did in the past with projects is you just generate a lot. So you maybe do it 100 times, and then you pick the best out of these. Can be a strategy.
Not a very cost-effective one, but
not a very cost-effective one. Okay. So what you said, you want to look a bit more into also other parts. So now we always looked at the tops.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start here. And now we pick, let's pick him. And now we will try to change the pants. So I believe so he has blue jeans. Now let's change that to black jeans and see what happens.
Feels like it takes longer time this time.
It feels like it.
Jeans are more complicated.
So, but voila, so that is a surprise, isn't it? So maybe we just invented the jeans polo. I don't know. Let's have a closer look. So that is not exactly what we were looking for.
No, but it looks quite cool. But for sure, how come it did not mask the bottom part?
Yeah. So that pretty much is a limitation of the model that we're using itself. This model has only been trained, and we haven't really talked about training so much, but I can maybe show you quickly. The data set. So data set is essentially, when it comes to AI training, you usually have some training set which contains examples. So most of these models learn essentially by looking at examples, and you give them just a lot of them. And here, this is the data set that they use to train this model. It's a very popular one, which consists essentially of image pairs. So you always have one image of a model wearing something, and then you have the item itself. So what we would call the pack shot. And you just have a lot of these pairs. What is special about this data set is that, as you can see here, it's always about upper body items, so top wear. That also means this model has only learned to fit top wear. So it just simply, it has never seen pants. So that's why it doesn't work with pants, unfortunately. So one way to address that is to retrain this model on a different data set. So that then includes pants, for example.
Got it. So it's actually not necessarily a limitation of the AI model itself, but more the training.
Exactly. So that also means if we want to try that, there is still a chance by using another model, which, if you remember the table before, it is also one of the newer ones. It scores generally a bit lower. However, what's different is, so let's maybe just go down here already, that this one has also been trained on full bodies. So here we can now try the same thing. Let's find him again. And same jeans. And now here we can actually pick. So in this case would be lower body. You also saw there was a dress option. We can try that one after.
Yep. Now, obviously, you have to pick your lower body, but I guess using other AI models, we can actually just automatically also detect that this is a lower body product category.
Exactly. Maybe something we can even talk in the future about, but that is what we use a lot in our products as well. So we use a lot of classification to know basically for any given picture, what is in the picture. Is it a person? Is it a pack shot? Is it top, bottom, even the perspectives, etc. So we can generally figure that out automatically. And well, here is the result. This time we actually got, well, actually jeans. You can see, I can make it maybe a bit larger. All right, there we go. So that worked. However, in comparison, you can see it's a bit more, I mean, especially here, usually where it's tricky is the overlap between upper and lower. That's a bit blurry. Generally, I would say the pattern is a bit more blurry than with the other model. Also, this one we noticed, I'm not sure if you can see that well now. I mean, in this example, actually would work quite okay. But this model, this, here's the name again. So this one, it also tends to actually change the person itself a bit, which is, of course, not what you want, so that even the face expression can change slightly. All right, so but I promised you dresses, so let's try that. Okay, let's go with this one. And then I have a dress here. And now we have to pick dress. Of course, they're also actually for menswear. I mean, you can imagine, for example, like a suit. So like a full body outfit. That would be maybe something like this as well.
But does this mean that you can actually combine the first model with this model to already now generate like upper body, which is better with the first one, but this one can still provide bottom? Yeah.
Generally, of course. I mean, in the end, they always output some image, and you can use that image as an input for another step. So that is possible, one way to address that. So here's the result. What we can see here is, so on first sight maybe looks good. However, then you will notice, especially the length, I think you can notice. So now it made it kind of a short version out of it, because the model, that's what I meant before. So if this model actually would have pants, then that would be probably different.
Got it.
I believe I even have that. So just to prove that point.
And here you don't have a prompt either, right?
And this one we don't have a prompt. That's correct. All right, there we go. So here actually the opposite happened. See, I mean, here in the original one, the jeans are maybe a bit longer than normal, and here, we also got now the very long version of it. So that is the challenge when it comes to the fit. It makes it fit into this picture.
Got it. I mean, it's the question really here is then, is it the AI models themselves, or is it more about the training? Like in order to improve it to the extent where it is acceptable for a consumer experience, which at this point in time, I think most would agree is not really there yet, unless you want to have a fun experience, but not an accurate experience. Is it much more about the development of the AI model itself, or is it more about just making sure that the training data corresponds to maybe a brand's type of products and their models, and fine tune it further? So what is required to happen in this industry to make this work really well?
Like usual, I would say it depends. So some things you can certainly address by using better training sets, more diverse training sets, etc. However, other things, I think with the model architecture that these are using here, are just not going to work out well, especially when we're talking about the fit and the size. I think it would require a different kind of foundation, essentially, that more understands, maybe also more in terms of 3D space. So also, I mean, let's say the properties of the material. So a jeans maybe can generally stretch differently than like topwear item. So that or a jeans jacket. So I mean, they're all also how the fabric basically folds and these kind of things. And these models, they simply don't really know that, or they cannot. I mean, there is no place in that model to really understand it, let's say, because they're very, very visual models simply. So they're just trying to align pixels in a way that makes sense. So that more or less resembles a natural picture. That is sort of what they were trained on.
Got it. Okay. Is there anything else that you can say about the training set or the training data?
I mean, what we can maybe point out here is, so I can bring these up again. So they are generally in this kind of space, there are two popular data sets. So that's the one I already brought up before, Vuitton HD. And then there's another one which is called dress code. What's to consider here is they are often used because it's a lot of work to actually create them. So I mean, you can imagine, we're talking about tens of thousands of pictures here. which takes quite some time to, first of all, to collect and then to sort, etc., etc. And then also the teams working on these kind of things, they are often not from within, let's say, the fashion industry. So these are researchers at some university, for example, and they generally do not have that access. So what they tend to do, and that is also where it becomes a bit problematic maybe, that they just basically scrape the internet. So they go to e-commerce site, pick those images, and then use them for training. Of course, if you are within the fashion industry, you have a different, obviously you have your own collections, you have your own images. That's what you can then use for training. And also then usually you will also have a better quality, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, I don't know if you have anything prepared, but in terms of the various components in the training set, you showed already like a pack shot and a model shot. Is there anything else that the brand would need to, figure out or collect?
Yeah, let's say it like this. So there are usually additional steps, or let's say these training sets, or the raw material is often, let's call it, enriched. So one thing that a lot of these models do, and then, I mean, it can be part of the actual training pipeline, so you don't have to actually think about that too much. However, I can show you maybe something that happens here. So let's pick here again a model image. So what is often done during the training is to give the model some understanding. Okay, here's a person, and well, literally the pose of this person. What is also it tells us about the perspective. And then what it helps, of course, also with is to know, okay, I mean, if there are the shoulders, here are the arms, etc. I mean, of course, that helps to fit on a fashion item in the end. So a lot of these models, they require this additional information about, I mean, essentially the skeleton of the person. So here it's also one popular model that is often used for that, open pose. That is essentially what it does. So you give it an image of any person, and then it tries to figure out where are the shoulders, basically all the joints, the important joints.
Got it. All right. Cool. Is there anything else you want to mention, or shall we conclude by a brief summary?
I would say let's do a quick summary.
So my understanding, based on what you've now told me, is that the models are trained to a certain extent. There seems to be like multiple one where one kind of is quite good on the upper part, but still, to me, it does not look like it's commercially grade use case towards consumers, because it can for sure get a bit, let's say, too creative. But it seems like it's in a place where for research and for designers and so on could be explored further. And I also hear that if the brands would create data sets and training sets, that might improve, at least over time, the ability to generate virtual try-ons for their customers or for their use cases more accurately, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair conclusion. So yes, I mean, generally I would say we see a trend, and that trend goes upwards. So these models are getting better and better. However, yes, I think we're not really there yet for most of the use cases. So especially, I mean, yes, I'm at home. I want to now go to this e-commerce website and want to know, does this fit me or not? How do I look? That might give me the wrong picture. So in the end, of course, the idea here is also to simply reduce the amount of returns. I think that is not yet really there to do this. However, I think especially when it comes to simple outfits, I mean, something like this here, just to get an idea of what are good combinations, maybe simply. Maybe also more in a kind of B2B setting. I think then you can already on that level, I think you can maybe do some things already with these models. And then I think where it also becomes now interesting is, you mentioned the data sets. I mean, a lot of these models are trained always on the same data sets. And also what is turns out to be quite important, or maybe sometimes even more important than the choice of the model itself, is the training set. So if you have a good training set, that you might then also actually get much better outputs. And I think now that this whole topic moves more and more into the fashion domain, which also means fashion brands have better training sets or can have better training sets when they sort their data. I think that might also help generally to improve on these.
Cool. All right. I guess we will keep track of the development of the AI models and how to train them and make them better and find the different applications for virtual try on. So if anyone is interested, of course, they're welcome to contact Touchtech. And hopefully when there are new developments, we will share them with the world in a new video. Thank you, Steffen.
Absolutely. Welcome.